I don't know who this is for, but I need you to pause right now and take a breath. I need you to hear me when I say this. God is already making a way out of this. You don't have to have the strategy. You don't have to have the solution. You just need the faith to believe that what's over your head is still under his feet. See, the enemy's been trying to wear you out with worry, but your worry is not your weapon. Your worship is. And while you've been stressing over the how, God's been moving in the background, unlocking doors you don't even know you'll need to walk through. You don't have to chase peace. Peace is already assigned to you. You don't have to figure out what's next. The God who parted the sea, who opened prison doors, who rolled away stones, that same God is already in your next, making it ready for your arrival. There's something powerful about understanding that just because you don't see movement doesn't mean there isn't any. So often we associate progress with visibility, with evidence, with tangible results. But God doesn't operate on human timelines or through human logic. He doesn't have to show you what he's doing to prove that he's working. In fact, some of the most miraculous shifts happen in silence, in secret, in stillness. Just because you can't trace his hand right now doesn't mean he's not moving behind the scenes. See, the enemy loves to convince you that the silence of God means the absence of God. He wants you to believe that because the doors haven't opened yet, because the healing hasn't manifested yet, because the relationship hasn't been restored yet. That somehow God is distant, that somehow he's forgotten you, or worse, that he's finished with you. But I came to disrupt that lie today. But you don't see it doesn't mean it's not happening. Just because it's not loud doesn't mean it's not powerful. God is strategic. He is intentional. And he is already working in the background, aligning things you didn't even know needed alignment. Sometimes God withholds visibility so that your trust can be tested, because it's easy to believe when everything looks like it's falling into place. It's easy to shout and praise when you can connect all the dots. But what happens when nothing makes sense? What happens when you feel like you're in the middle of a storm and heaven is silent? That's when faith is forged. That's when your roots grow deeper. That's when you begin to trust not just in what God can do, but in who he is. And who he is faithful. That's not just something he does, it's who he is. He is consistent. He is sovereign. And he is already orchestrating your way out of the very thing that's been keeping you up at night. He doesn't need your permission to begin the work. He doesn't need your understanding to complete it. He needs your trust. He needs your surrender. He needs you to stop trying to micromanage a miracle and let him be God. You weren't created to carry the weight of figuring it all out. That's not your job. Your job is obedience. Your job is surrender. Your job is showing up in faith when you feel like falling apart. Because while you're stressing, God is setting the stage. Why you're losing sleep over how? God already spoke, let there be. Over your next season, he is moving in rooms you haven't entered yet. He's placing your name in conversations you haven't been invited to yet. He's softening hearts that once rejected you, preparing opportunities that seemed locked, shifting atmospheres to make room for you. You are not forgotten. You are not overlooked. You are not abandoned. You are not stuck. You are in process. And God doesn't start what he doesn't plan to finish. Even now, as you sit in what feels like uncertainty, know this heaven is active. Angels are assigned. Provision is on its way. You don't have to see the plan to trust the planner. You don't need every step mapped out when you're walking with the one who orders them. Some breakthroughs come in motion, and some breakthroughs are born in hiddenness. Think about the seed, buried, unseen, seemingly motionless. But under the surface, roots are forming, the shell is breaking, and transformation is happening. Just because it's not visible doesn't mean it's not valuable. Just because you don't feel the shift doesn't mean it's not underway. What God is doing in the dark will sustain you in the light. What he's preparing in secret will shock the world when it's revealed. So don't confuse silence with stagnation. Don't misinterpret waiting as wasting. When God is quiet, he's not absent, he's focused. He's refining, redirecting, repositioning. He's making sure that when the door opens, you'll be ready to walk through it. He's making sure that when the blessing arrives, you'll have the maturity to sustain it. He's making sure that when the promise manifests, you won't sabotage it with the anxiety you picked up in the waiting room. You may not see it, but God is already making a way. Stress has a way of convincing us that we're being productive, when in reality we're just draining ourselves in circles. It disguises itself as responsibility, as control, as preparation. But underneath it all, stress is just fear dressed up in urgency. When we find ourselves spiraling in thought, trying to fix, to plan, to solve everything at once, what we're really saying is, God, I don't fully trust you with this. We don't mean to say it that way, but our behavior starts to reflect it. We move out of alignment with peace and start grasping at anything that gives us the illusion of control. But stress is not a strategy. It is not a spiritual gift. It is not a fruit of the Spirit. It's a sign we've slipped out of trust and into self-reliance. Faith, on the other hand, is steady. It doesn't mean you ignore reality. It means you choose to anchor yourself to a greater one. Faith doesn't deny the storm. It just knows who's in the boat. It says, I see what's happening, but I refuse to let what I see define what I believe. It's not always loud. It's not always emotional. Sometimes faith is quiet, deliberate, and disciplined. It's the decision to speak God's word when your feelings are screaming the opposite. It's the decision to choose praise instead of panic. To walk, even when you don't know where the road leads, that's faith. So many of us have been trained to overfunction as a survival mechanism. We overthink, overplan, overanalyze, overcommit. And all the while, we call it being strong. But real strength is in surrender. Real power is found in letting go and allowing God to be God. It takes more strength to rest in Him than it does to keep forcing something that's outside your control. Stress says, if I don't make it happen, it won't happen. Faith says, if God is in it, nothing can stop it. There is a difference between working in faith and striving in fear, and we have to learn to discern the voice we're listening to. When we let stress drive us, we end up exhausted, frustrated, and often bitter, not because God isn't faithful, but because we've been running on our own logic instead of His Spirit. Stress causes us to react instead of respond. It pulls us out of the present and into imaginary futures where everything falls apart. It whispers that we have to carry the weight of it all, that it's on us to fix it, to hold it together. But the Word of God says, cast your cares upon Him, for He cares for you. You weren't meant to carry what only God can handle. And let's be honest, sometimes we hold on to stress because we've convinced ourselves that worry equals love, that the more we stress over a person or situation, the more we prove how much we care. But worry doesn't prove love, peace does, trust does. Being able to rest in God's promises, even when things are chaotic, is one of the most powerful expressions of faith you can offer. It's saying, God, I trust you with this person. I trust you with this decision. I trust you with this timeline. I trust you when it looks like nothing is working. That's not weakness. That's spiritual maturity. It is also a level of humility required to admit that we've been using stress as a default response because it's familiar. It's how we've coped. It's what we've seen modeled. But just because it's familiar doesn't mean it's fruitful. Just because it's how you've always handled things doesn't mean it's how God is calling you to handle this. There comes a point when we have to ask ourselves, what has stressing really solved? Has it moved anything forward? Has it brought peace into our lives? Has it aligned us with God's heart? Or has it kept us distracted, depleted, and distant from His voice? Faith invites us to slow down, to stop rehearsing worst-case scenarios and start declaring what God has already said. It invites us to stop measuring our progress by the pressure we feel and start measuring it by the peace we walk in. You are not responsible for the outcome, only for your obedience. God is not asking you to carry the full picture. He's asking you to take the next step, to trust that He sees what you don't, that He's gone before you, that He is for you, that He knows exactly what He's doing, even when you feel like everything is unraveling. Peace is not just the absence of problems. It's the presence of God in the midst of them. It's not the result of a perfect life or a smooth path. It's a spiritual inheritance. Peace isn't something you earn when everything calms down. It's something you receive and protect even when the storm is raging. So many people are waiting for peace to show up once the situation improves, once the diagnosis changes, once the money comes in, once the relationship gets restored. But God never designed peace to be circumstantial. He never meant for your calm to be tied to your control. He called peace your portion. When Jesus spoke peace to the winds and waves, he didn't wait until they settled down to declare it. He spoke to the storm while it was still raging. Because peace isn't passive, it's powerful. And if Jesus has the authority to command peace in the storm, and if his spirit lives inside of you, then you carry that same authority to speak peace over your own life, not because you're trying to manifest it, but because you've been given access to it. The problem is, we've gotten so used to surviving that we don't even recognize peace when it comes. We've built our lives around hustle, anxiety, fear, and striving. And then we wonder why rest feels foreign. But peace isn't unfamiliar, it's home. It's what your soul was designed for. That's why stress wears you out. It's not aligned with your true identity. The world will try to convince you that panic is normal, that you should be worried, that if you're not stressing out, you're not paying attention. But kingdom living flips that logic on its head. You're not being irresponsible when you choose peace. You're being obedient. You're not being naive when you don't let your emotions run your life. You're being faithful. There's a difference between awareness and anxiety. You can be aware of the facts and still be grounded in truth. You can feel the weight of the situation and still carry peace through it. Because peace isn't a denial of what's happening. It's a declaration of who is in charge. Sometimes peace looks like walking away from the argument instead of proving your point. Sometimes it looks like closing your laptop and resting when everything inside of you says, keep working. Sometimes it's choosing to forgive, not because they apologized, but because you're not willing to give your peace away in exchange for bitterness. Peace will cost you pride. It will cost you control. It will cost you the need to be right, the need to always understand, the need to have it all figured out. But what you gain in return is far more valuable. You gain clarity. You gain stability. You gain access to the kind of spiritual maturity that doesn't get tossed around by every emotional wave. And when you start protecting your peace, you also start changing your environment. You begin to attract different conversations, different relationships, different opportunities. People can feel when someone is anchored. They can feel when your peace is not just performance, but a posture. And that posture doesn't come from pretending everything is okay. It comes from knowing that even if it's not, God still is. He is still good. He is still present. He is still working. That's why the enemy targets your peace, because he knows how powerful you are when you're not distracted. He knows how clearly you hear from God when you're not buried under fear. He knows how bold your prayers are when you're not praying from panic, but from trust. You have to learn to protect your peace like it's a treasure, because it is. It's not optional, it's essential. The word says that God will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are stayed on him. Not those whose situations are perfect, not those who get everything they pray for, but those who remain focused on him. That tells me peace isn't passive, it's something we pursue. And not just once, but daily, moment by moment, choosing to realign with truth every time the chaos tries to creep in. Every time fear whispers lies, every time anxiety tries to take the wheel, you speak the truth louder. God did not design you to be tossed and turned by the winds of circumstance. He designed you to walk in supernatural peace, a peace that guards your heart and mind, a peace that leads you, a peace that holds you together when everything around you is trying to pull you apart. There are moments in life when it feels like nothing is moving, nothing is changing, and every prayer you've prayed has hit the ceiling and fallen back into your lap unanswered. You start to question whether you missed God, whether the promise was ever real, whether what you're hoping for is even worth the wait. In those seasons, the temptation is strong to settle, to shrink, to assume that the silence of heaven must mean denial. But delay does not mean denial. Delay is not rejection. In the kingdom of God, delay is often a divine setup. God works in layers and seasons, and sometimes the delay is his protection. Sometimes he's holding something back, not because he's punishing you, but because he's preparing you. There are some doors that look like blessings, but if you walk through them too soon, they can break you. There are some people you think you need, but if God let them stay, they would poison the very thing you're called to birth. There are opportunities that look like favor, but if the foundation of your character isn't strong enough, they can turn into distractions dressed in promotion. God is not just interested in giving you what you want. He's committed to making sure you're ready to carry it. Waiting seasons are not wasted seasons. They are stretching seasons. They are places where faith is refined, where trust is tested, where roots grow deep. While you're waiting, God is working on things you can't see. He's aligning circumstances, shifting hearts, building capacity, and removing obstacles. Just because you haven't seen the manifestation yet doesn't mean progress isn't happening. There are divine delays that are orchestrated with precision so that when the moment comes, everything is in place, not just for your arrival, but for your sustainability. We live in a world that glorifies speed. Faster is better. Quicker is smarter. Instant results are the expectation. But the kingdom of God doesn't operate on microwave timing. God is not in a rush. He's eternal. He sees the end from the beginning. What feels slow to you is strategic to him. What feels like a setback is often a setup for a greater comeback. There are lessons you only learn in the waiting. There is strength you only gain through delay. There's a version of you that God is trying to develop, and it only comes through time and tension. When you understand that delay is a divine tool, you stop fighting it and start learning from it. You begin to ask different questions. Not, why is this taking so long? But, God, what are you building in me while I wait? You begin to shift from frustration to formation. Because what God is forming in you is far more important than what you're asking him to fix around you. You can't carry the weight of your calling without the endurance built in the delay. You can't walk into destiny with the same mindset you had in survival. Delay develops discipline. It teaches you to hear God in the quiet. It teaches you to stand when nothing around you makes sense. It builds your spiritual muscle so you can carry the promise without crumbling under the pressure. And here's the truth. Many don't want to admit sometimes we're not ready. We think we are. We think we're prepared, mature, equipped. But God knows the version of us that will sabotage the blessing and the version of us that will steward it. So he delays not to punish, but to prepare. He holds back not to withhold, but to mature. He says, not yet, because he sees the whole picture, and he wants you to walk into fullness, not fragments. The enemy will try to use delay to plant doubt. He'll whisper that God has forgotten you, that the promise is void, that it's never going to happen. He wants you to confuse God's timing with God's silence. But spiritual maturity is learning to stand on what God said, even when you don't hear him saying anything new. It's learning to hold the promise even when the process gets long. It's refusing to lower your expectation just because the clock is ticking. When God delays something, it means the environment isn't ready, or you aren't ready, or both. But when the appointed time comes, no demon in hell, no delay, no obstacle, no closed door will be able to stop what God has ordained. Divine setups are often wrapped in disappointment first. They look like missed chances, failed relationships, closed doors, detours. But behind every delay is a designer who knows exactly what he's doing. There are seasons when everything around you feels like it's crumbling, like the weight of life is too much to carry, and you're left wondering if this is how it all ends. You feel boxed in, emotionally drained, spiritually tired, mentally stretched, and nothing you try seems to make a dent in the chaos. It's in those moments when your back is against the wall and your strength is running on empty that the enemy will try to convince you that it's over, that the darkness has won, that the pain is permanent. But what feels like the end is often just the beginning of breakthrough. God does his best work in what looks like dead ends. God specializes in resurrection. He steps into places where hope has dried up and breathes life again. He doesn't need ideal circumstances to move. He needs surrender. He needs a heart that still dares to believe even when nothing around you looks like a miracle. You may be standing in the ashes of what used to be, but ashes are what God uses to trade for beauty. You might feel like you're at the lowest point of your story, but low places are where God writes some of the most powerful chapters. Your breaking point might just be the birthing point. Sometimes the beginning of breakthrough feels like breaking. It feels like everything is falling apart, but what's actually happening is that the old is making room for the new. The shaking is not to destroy you. It's to dislodge what can't stay with you in the next season. The discomfort is not punishment, it's preparation. What you're calling the end might just be a divine interruption to reroute you into something better. Closed doors, failed plans, unexpected shifts, they all look like endings, but in God's hands, they become beginnings. Breakthrough doesn't always show up with lightning and loud voices. Sometimes it starts with a whisper, a moment of clarity, a shift in perspective, a quiet decision to keep going. A simple act of obedience, and as small as that might seem, that's often where the turning begins. You don't always recognize the beginning when it's happening. You don't always see the light at the end of the tunnel from the middle of it. But just because you can't see it yet doesn't mean it hasn't started. God moves in layers, in moments, in steps. And many times, it's only in hindsight that you realize the beginning of your breakthrough started right in the middle of what looked like your breakdown. This is why faith is so essential in the middle of pain, because faith teaches you to see beyond the surface. It trains you to look through spiritual eyes instead of natural ones. Faith tells you that endings aren't always endings. They're sometimes disguised entrances. It's the lens that helps you hold on to what God said, even when what you see contradicts it. Faith keeps you anchored when everything else is shifting. Faith says, I don't understand this, but I trust the one who does. The enemy wants to use what you're going through to convince you that God has left you. But what if the very thing you're calling a breakdown is actually the container for your next breakthrough? What if the pain is not a period, but a comma? What if the tears are watering something that's about to grow? When God gets ready to shift your life, He often allows disruption first. Not to hurt you, but to prepare you. Not to ruin your plans, but to replace them with something better. We have to be careful not to judge the story too early. Just because this chapter feels dark doesn't mean the whole book is. Just because this season feels like loss doesn't mean the next one won't be full of restoration. God is the author and finisher, which means He writes with the end in mind. What looks like chaos to you might be construction to Him. He's rebuilding, refining, and restoring. And often, He does it in ways that don't look like breakthrough at first. They look like endings, but endings to us are just transitions to Him. When you're in the middle of what feels like the end, that's the time to press in, not pull back. That's when your prayers matter most. When your praise becomes your weapon, when your worship becomes a declaration of war against everything trying to steal your hope. The tension you feel right now might be the pressure that births purpose. The battle you're facing might be the one that breaks generational patterns. The weight you're carrying might be what builds the strength you'll need in the next season. There are times in life when it feels like everything has come to a standstill. You look around and nothing is moving, nothing is changing, and you begin to wonder if you've missed it, if you're stuck in a place you were never meant to be. It's easy to confuse a very pause with permanent paralysis. But being still is not the same as being stuck. God is not a God of stagnation. He is a God of strategy. And if you're following Him, even when it feels like you're not moving, you're being positioned. Positioning doesn't always feel good. It doesn't always look like progress. Sometimes it looks like isolation, like delay, like disruption. But positioning is not punishment. It's preparation. God will often pull you out of one place before He reveals the next. He will separate you from what was familiar in order to develop what is foundational. When you're being positioned, it means God sees something up ahead that you don't. It means He's aligning you with purpose, with timing, with provision, and with people you haven't met yet. And just because it hasn't all unfolded doesn't mean He's not working behind the scenes. What you call stuck, God might be calling still. What you call wasted time, God might be calling divine alignment. You are not forgotten. You are not overlooked. You are not behind. You are being positioned. Sometimes God slows you down because he knows the speed you were moving at would have made you miss the details. There are moments when he'll pause your plans because he sees the bigger picture and he knows what you're heading toward. He doesn't operate by your calendar or your checklist. He operates by your calling. Being positioned means being placed with purpose. It means God is not just moving you anywhere. He's moving you where the oil flows, where the favor is assigned, where your voice will be heard, and where your gifts will make room for you. He's not a random God. Every delay, every detour, every door that didn't open is part of a bigger orchestration. And just because you didn't end up where you thought you would doesn't mean you're off course. It might mean you're finally on his course. There are some places where your anointing can't grow, so God had to pull you out. There are some environments that were good for your comfort, but toxic to your calling, so God had to disrupt your peace to protect your purpose. Being repositioned can feel like rejection, but it's actually redirection. It's God saying, I'm getting you in place for what I've already prepared. You're not stuck. You're being moved with intention. And movement doesn't always look external. Some of the most important shifts happen internally. While you're waiting for things around you to change, God might be changing something in you. He's stretching your faith. He's maturing your vision. He's deepening your dependence. He's teaching you how to walk by faith and not by sight. That internal shift is positioning. It's what prepares you to steward the promise when it arrives. Because the version of you that receives the blessing has to be different than the version of you that only prayed for it. This is where trust comes in. When it feels like nothing is happening, can you still believe that something is being built? When it seems like you've been benched, can you trust that God is coaching you from the sideline for a specific assignment? When it looks like others are moving ahead, can you believe that your pace is not their pace and your path is not their path? Comparison will tell you you're behind, but God says you're right where you need to be. You have to learn to interpret this season through the lens of faith. You're not in limbo. You're in process. You're not forgotten. You're being developed. You're not wandering. You're being led. There is a difference between feeling stuck and being positioned, and the key to recognizing it is in understanding who's holding the map. If you've given your journey to God, then every step, even the quiet, confusing, or uncomfortable ones, are under his control. He's not reacting to your life. He's orchestrating it. He's not figuring it out as he goes. He's already finished it. He's placing you where you need to be, when you need to be there, and how you need to arrive.